Ground News is combating divisiveness in media. Ground is a news comparison platform that helps you see multiple perspectives for any news story so you can be more of a well-rounded news reader. Download the free app at ground.news/Pakman. There is a huge scientific and societal pressure that's growing on the COVID anti-vaxxers that are still refusing to get the coronavirus vaccine, as we are now starting to see more than half of the United States see an increase in cases, thanks mostly to the very contagious Delta variant spreading, in particular among unvaccinated people. And of course, because no vaccine is 100% effective of the COVID vaccines that we currently have, by sheer math, also picking off some people who did do the right thing and did go and get themselves vaccinated. And so it's overwhelmingly happening in the least vaccinated counties. This is translating to happening more in red states than in blue states. And yesterday, I already told you about the stunning numbers which show that in May, I mean, look at this, in May, 99.2% of those who died of coronavirus were not vaccinated, while 0.8% of those who died had been vaccinated. Maryland says that 100% of COVID-19 deaths last month were among the unvaccinated. So this is no joke. The numbers are, to call them overwhelming is really an understatement. And it's getting so bad. In other words, the impact of not being vaccinated is so huge on a country or a state or even on a county's health system that people are going crazy trying to figure out what is it going to take to get people vaccinated so that we can stop the development of new variants and the evolution of new variants and stop the spread among mostly unvaccinated people, but still affecting the vaccinated as well, because no vaccine is 100% effective. Now, in the United States, we're not going to see government mandatory vaccinations. Employers can certainly legally require employees to be vaccinated in most cases to go back to an in-person working situation. Some countries are taking a much more authoritarian approach. We're not going to see this in the United States. But Tajikistan and the Vatican are imposing mandatory vaccination on adults, straight up, period. In Italy, there are several counties or territories that have imposed mandatory vaccination on certain sections of the population. Italian doctors and health workers in both the public and private sector must be vaccinated, or they will face not being allowed to work directly with patients, which will make it really difficult for them to do their jobs. The British government in mid-June said all home care staff must be fully vaccinated to continue working. Kazakhstan on July 1st ordered mandatory coronavirus vaccinations for a wide range of workers who come into contact with others. Now, in the United States, we're not going to see that. I'm not an advocate of that. I am an advocate of people getting vaccinated, and we have to figure out how to get them to do it. We have some examples in the U.S., like the city of San Francisco. They've said it's going to require municipal employees to be vaccinated, or they could face penalties up to and including dismissal. But that's only when there's full FDA approval of the vaccine. Houston Methodist Hospital in Texas, more than 150 employees have been fired or resigned because they didn't comply with their employer directive to get themselves vaccinated. The Delta variant is less well handled by the current vaccines, and we're already seeing a more contagious Lambda variant appear in Australia. We still don't know that much about it. So, this is the key time. Do we want a resurgence of this in the fall? Do we want to have to go back this fall to the direction of, hopefully not as bad, but the direction of the way things were last fall? And yes, almost half of U.S. reports of U.S. states are reporting rising cases, largely because of this Delta variant. About 157 million Americans right now, 58% of U.S. adults are fully vaccinated. 67% of U.S. adults have had at least one shot. We are getting there. We did not meet Joe Biden's goal of 70% by July 4th. Hopefully by next week, this weekend or early next week, we will get to that point. But what is it going to take to get these people vaccinated? Because otherwise it will be more variants and more spread. And eventually it will be more deaths as well if we get a variant that really evades the vaccines and has a higher death rate. Understand that to say that we've been lucky about anything in this pandemic, it feels crass. It feels outrageous to say. But I encourage you, read Lawrence Wright's latest book, The End of October. It's a novel, it's fiction, but it's clearly based around a coronavirus-like global pandemic. We're lucky that the real world coronavirus, for now, doesn't have nearly the death rate that the imaginary virus in Lawrence Wright's book, The End of October, has. Because if we had, and we could have, a much more deadly variant, the numbers will be even more horrifying than what the U.S. and the world has already endured. So what'll it take to get these folks vaccinated? I know about a third of them say, if there is full FDA approval, I will go and get vaccinated. That's about a third of the currently vaccine hesitant based on a poll from a few weeks ago. Do I believe a full third of them are really going to get vaccinated when there's FDA approval? No, I imagine some will say, okay, well, let me now give it a few months that it's been FDA approved fully rather than just as emergency use. Some of them will, some of them won't. What will it take to get more people vaccinated? At this point, I don't know. Will it be required vaccinations to go to sporting events? Will it be required vaccinations to travel? A lot of these folks don't travel anyway. I don't know what the answer is, but it's very scary. And we are seeing in the numbers what we could be facing very, very soon. We have just insane news. News Corporation slash Fox News is going to be launching their own weather channel, if you can believe it. The Week is reporting that Fox is launching a weather streaming service, and it is already feuding with the Weather Channel. Rupert Murdoch is looking to rain on the Weather Channel's parade. There's a nice line. Murdoch is set to debut a new streaming service, Fox Weather, this fall, with his company believing that the, quote, sometimes staid world of weather TV is ripe for disruption, the New York Times reports. Fox Weather is aiming to take on the Weather Channel, but the Times noted that the latter company is already throwing some shade at its new competitor. Weather Channel Chief Content Officer Nora Zimmett told the New York Times they couldn't even get a headline right about Tropical Storm Bill, slamming a recent article on Fox News' website claiming the storm posed a massive threat. I applaud Fox getting into the weather space, but they should really leave the life-saving information to the experts. That is not really the issue for me. The issue for me is the next aspect of this that's addressed. Zimmett added that climate change is too important to politicize, and if they do that, they will be doing Americans a disservice. A Fox Weather spokesperson pushed back, telling the Times, quote, while the Weather Channel is focused on trolling FoxNews.com for unrelated stories, Fox Weather is busy preparing the debut of our innovative platform to deliver critical coverage to an incredibly underserved market. When I hear that Fox Weather says weather is an underserved market, when it's a third of the nightly local news on the 6 p.m. news in basically every market, on the 11 p.m. news in basically every market. If you look at a half hour of local news, those half hour news shows, once you take out commercials, it's 21 minutes. Often 6 or 7 of those 21 minutes are weather, a third. OK, and in addition to that, you have the Weather Channel. In addition to that, everybody on their phones has constant live weather. And when there are notable weather events, the major cable networks like MSNBC, CNN, and Fox cover weather. So when I hear Fox Weather say that weather is underserved, what I'm hearing is there's not enough climate denial presented as science and packaged as if it is the Weather Channel. And that is what I fundamentally believe that this is about. They make billions by playing political theater, stoking polarization, stoking gridlock, allowing the people who say Trump really won and all of this stuff to just appear on their network. They build that up. and then they build themselves up as the ones who will tell you the truth. Why am I not seeing on the other networks that Trump actually won? Well, maybe it's because Trump didn't really win. No, it's because nobody but Fox will tell me the truth. That's the ideology and the attitude that they sort of stoke in their audience. And with a fair amount of climate denial, right? Remember the clips from Fox News? Despite it being bitterly cold in the winter in North Dakota, in D.C., Democrats are talking about climate change, those types of headlines. So they've got the perfect audience for it. And now they will smoothly make the switch and say, hey, we'll also tell you the truth about the weather and climate, which are actually two different things. Come on over. This is what they are planning. In a sense, it's brilliant. It's evil genius, I guess is what I would call it. Weather is going to become a ratings maker in the sense that it will now be a proud and defiant alternative to the fake news weather that the meteorologists on the Weather Channel and elsewhere are giving you. If it weren't so obviously going to work, it would be worth laughing at. But because it's probably going to work, it's actually the type of thing we should be crying over. Creating an alternative narrative that climate deniers can point to and say, no. Fox Weather has a different perspective on this. It's extraordinarily dangerous, and it will be launching in a few months. And I am genuinely horrified by what this may do, because remember, there is a virus in the U.S. which is people don't even understand what are facts. And whenever I say that, it sounds like I'm using strange syntax because people assume I'm saying people don't understand what the facts are. No. It's worse. People no longer understand what are facts, what types of statement are empirical statements, statements based in the scientific method, for example, versus what are just opinions. And when you don't understand what is a fact and what is an opinion, which is what Fox News specializes in, all hell breaks loose. Apply that deranged system to weather now, and it is a recipe for absolute and total disaster. I don't think I'm being exaggerated in how dangerous this is, but I want to hear from you. You can find me on Twitter at @Pakman and let me know your thoughts. I've been on Fox News a couple of times. If I'm ever invited back, ground news is one of the first things I would use to get my head in the game and prepare myself for the interview, because ground news is a news source comparison platform that lets you compare how outlets from the left, right, and center are reporting on a story. It makes it easy to see the nuances of how sources with differing political biases are covering a story. And it also shows you your news blind spots, stories that your side of the political spectrum may not have covered. Ground news can help you build a well-crafted argument for debating people you disagree with, or ground news can help you discover something new about your own perspective, challenging your own strongly held views on political issues. Be the most informed person in the room. Download the free Ground News app today by going to ground.news/Pakman. Remember that the David Pakman Show is made possible mostly through memberships. People like you who say, I'll sign up. You can go to joinpakman.com. We do a daily member-only show. We've got the 1 hour a day show, but then we've got an extra 15 to 20 minutes with behind-the-scenes stuff and a lot of other things every day for our members. You can access it instantly when you sign up at joinpakman.com. And of course, the coupon code is available. Better21 will save you a bunch off of the membership of your choice. Okay, as predicted, Donald Trump was never going to be reinstated to the White House in August. There is no mechanism for reinstatement in the United States Constitution or in the United States law. One of the biggest purveyors of these ideas was Trump sycophant Mike Lindell, CEO and founder of the MyPillow brand, who will also be holding some kind of what he's calling a symposium on sometime in early August. Whether he even knows what symposium means, I don't know. But he now has a new date on which he says Donald Trump will be reinstated. Mike Lindell has set August 13 as the date where Trump will again become the president of the United States. This is the first time he's put a specific date on this entire thing. Business Insider reports on it and says MyPillow CEO Mike Lindell says he believed former President Donald Trump would take the impossible step of being reinstated as president on August 13. Speaking to Brannon Howse on the conservative WVW broadcast network on Sunday, Lindell said that by that date, Trump's reinstatement would be the talk of the world. Donald Trump won, he claimed. I mean, it's pretty simple, okay? Let's take a look at the video in which Mike Lindell says this.
By the time the morning of August 13th, it'll be the talk of the world going, hurry up. Let's get this election pulled down. Let's right the right. Let's get these communists out, that had taken over. And you'll see, when I say that, and they'll say, well, what's going to happen to all the people that were involved? I don't know. Right now, the biggest concern is getting this election pulled down. Donald Trump won. I mean, it's pretty simple. Okay, and there were many down-ticket senators, too, that they did, too, and stuff. You'll find all that out. By the time...
So in addition to this degree of insanity, Mike Lindell is also claiming that at his symposium in August, he has voting machines that he is going to be holding some kind of a mock election to reenact how the voting machines did all the stuff that he claims that they supposedly did. So there's a few different things going on here that are worth talking about. First of all, how many times has the date changed at this point? Of course, it's never going to happen. It's not going to be August 13th. A couple of weeks ago, Mike Lindell also floated the idea it might be September. It's never going to happen. Now, a lot of people come to me and they say, David, sir, do you think that Mike Lindell believes this stuff? Do you think he actually believes that Donald Trump genuinely won the election?
Congratulations, sir. You just won the election.
Exactly. And I think the answer is it doesn't matter. If I had to guess, I think that Mike Lindell has the sense that there was some fraud, he believes. He doesn't really know whether it's enough that it would have given the election to Donald Trump, but he doesn't care. And he's making a bunch of money. He's getting a ton of publicity. He has all of his conservative friends promoting his pillows. Everybody's got a coupon code for his pillows and so on and so forth. I don't think it matters. I think the important thing is that the big picture of this is a really, really dangerous grift because of the fact that their followers are so gullible. And if you think that those followers will ever learn their lesson, when August 13th comes and goes and, oh, lo and behold, Donald Trump does not become president of the United States, if you think then they will finally say, you know what, guys, this just isn't going to happen. It's over. Look as an analogy at how many times those evangelical end of the world apocalypse types have gotten their dates wrong for the rapture. We've interviewed some of them on the show, and every single time that they get the date wrong, they go back to their followers and they say there was a miscalculation, or some bad actor got in the way, or someone didn't pray hard enough, or whatever the case may be. And the exact same thing is what is going to happen here. Either it's the deep state that got in the way, even though it certainly would have happened if they didn't, or whatever the case may be. That's all going to happen. The question will be, what is the eventual grift going to be? Will it transition into, well, the next thing really now is just the election and it's time to just donate. Let's donate and we'll win 2022 and then it'll become 2024. Like, is that the grift? Is it that some of these people like Mike Lindell might run for something in some way? There's been this idea that Mike Lindell might run for governor of Minnesota. I don't know ultimately where the grift is going to go, but for now, it's been very profitable for Mike Lindell. And Trump, whether he believes it or not, there are reports Trump does believe it, which is just wacky. I mean, just cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. But the reports that Trump believes it suggest to me that he also is seeing this as a reason to reinvigorate those rallies that he's been doing. And certainly Trump making no friends with most of the people that were in his administration. And that's exactly what I want to talk about next. Donald Trump had a full, complete, and total meltdown because his former Attorney General, William Barr, we now know, admitted there's no evidence of any materially significant fraud that would have affected the election results in even a single state. Now, this is, when we talk about election fraud and election integrity, there will often be this question posed by people on the right who will say, are you sure that no one voted twice? Are you sure that there was not a single instance of fraudulent voting? And that's the wrong question to be asking. I have explained from the beginning. The question is, do we have any evidence that materially significant fraud took place that would even maybe change the results of a single state? And remember that if you just flip Georgia, Biden still wins. If you just flip Arizona, Biden still wins. OK, and the answer to that is no. So we can't let them get us off on the wrong question. And along those lines, there's a New Atlantic piece, very, very interesting piece about William Barr, which says, and the piece is written by Jonathan Karl. It's called Inside William Barr's Breakup with Trump. This is a really interesting piece, not because it makes William Barr look good. William Barr is one of the most disgusting and depraved attorneys general. It's just that even Barr had no choice but to say, you didn't win. The article writes, it's fascinating. In a series of interviews with me this spring, Barr spoke for the first time about the events surrounding his breakup with Trump. I have also spoken with senior officials in the Trump White House and Justice Department who provided additional details about Barr's actions and the former president's explosive response. Barr and those close to him have a reason to tell his version of this story. He has been widely seen as a Trump lackey who politicized the Justice Department. But when the big moment came after the election, he defied the president who expected to do his bidding. This language of Mike Pence defied Trump on January 6th, and he didn't do, well, what, right? William Barr defied Trump. It may be in some really narrow sense accurate that they didn't do the thing Trump wanted them to do, but they didn't really have a choice. Mike Pence can't stop the election from going forward and Joe Biden from becoming president of the United States. Trump might think Pence could have done that, but Pence couldn't do that. And much the same way, in any real sense, I mean, Barr could have attempted things which would have violated all sorts of law and the way that elections are run. But in reality, the defiance that we saw from William Barr was just, well, no, he can't get involved. There's nothing that he can actually do. And the article goes on to say, Barr's betrayal, this is amazing. Barr's betrayal came on December 1 over lunch in the Attorney General's private dining room with Michael Balsamo, a Justice Department beat reporter at the AP. Also in attendance were the DOJ Chief of Staff, Will Levy, and spokesperson Carrie Kupek. Balsamo was not told the reason for the invitation. When Barr dropped his bombshell between bites of salad, he mumbled, and Balsamo wasn't sure that he had caught what Attorney General had said. Just to be general, Balsamo said, are you saying, sir, I think you better repeat what you just said, Kupek interjected. Barr repeated, to date, we have not seen fraud on a scale that could have affected a different outcome in the election. This time, Balsamo heard him. Balsamo's story appeared on the AP New Wire shortly after lunch. Disputing Donald Trump's persistent baseless claims, Attorney General William Barr declared Tuesday the U.S. Justice Department had uncovered no evidence of widespread voter fraud that could change the outcome of the 2020 election. Once this report went public, Donald Trump went absolutely and completely insane. And now, of course, Trump has a full and complete meltdown. This happened a couple days ago while we were on our vacation. Statement by Donald J. Trump. Look at this. Look at how quickly Trump turns on people. Rhino, former Attorney General Bill Barr failed to investigate election fraud. Now, that's untrue. Even though it's unclear Barr should have been involved in looking into it, Barr did look into it, and he found no materially significant fraud. Trump goes on and really let down the American people. I would argue the American people are not let down when democracy actually gets the person who won into office. That's how democracy works. Even the scam that took place in Georgia of ballot stuffing on camera, He couldn't see what was wrong with it. Now, that's a completely bogus conspiracy. It's been widely debunked. Just like he failed to understand the Horowitz report and let everyone down with respect to getting a timely investigation. Where's Durham on all of the corruption of the Obama-Biden administration? He goes on to say, and this is slightly off screen, for which I apologize, it's people in authority like Bill Barr that allow the crazed radical left to succeed. He and other rhinos in the Republican Party are being used in order to try to convince people that the election was legitimate, when so many incredible facts now come out to show conclusively that it wasn't. None of that is true. Trump fully melting down and now going after William Barr. Even going further, Trump writing, if he felt this way, why did Barr say he was greatly honored and proud to have played a role in the many successes and unprecedented achievements you have delivered to the American people in the final letter he wrote to me? Because Barr's a politician and he's going out with a completely standard, meaningless, pseudo suck-up letter of no value whatsoever. He said few could have weathered these attacks, much less forge ahead with a positive program for the country. William Barr may believe that and yet have found no voter fraud. These are not mutually exclusive things. Trump also finishing this off by saying, now it was revealed that Barr was being pushed to tell lies about the election by Mitch McConnell, another beauty who was worried about damaging the Republican chances in the Georgia runoff. What really damaged the Senate Republicans was allowing their races to be rigged and stolen, and worse, the American people to no longer believe their vote matters because spineless rhinos like William Barr and Mitch McConnell did nothing. Here's my message on this is crazy out of this world stuff. I mean, it's just almost nothing he's saying is true. He got William Barr's name right. He correctly claimed there were runoffs in Georgia. That's true. Everything else is lies. As cartoonish as this is, do not get complacent. The midterms are starting essentially in 3 months. The midterm season starts. Unless we want a repeat of Obama's 2010 situation, we have to come out and vote. Then there's 2024. I already told you yesterday, a Trump 2024 ticket against Biden and or Kamala Harris, I don't think looks particularly good. And especially if Republicans have a strong 2022 midterm, 2024, Trump versus Biden or Trump versus Harris scares me significantly. Last thought on this. Every time Trump supporters say we like Trump because he cares about America and he's good for the country. Look at these statements. Look at these lies. And he will attack American democracy in absolutely any way that he sees advantageous to him. He doesn't care about the country. He certainly doesn't care about his supporters. And he cares about them and other people only to the extent that they are politically useful to him. They're about to get useful again. His supporters are about to get useful again because he needs their money so that he can play kingmaker in 2022. I can't think of anything less patriotic. And Trump just melting down on anyone who simply said, Mr. President, I wasn't able to find any evidence that you actually won. Those now become enemies and they now become rhinos and unpatriotic or whatever the case may be. It's disgusting. I can't think of anything less patriotic. And we'll have more on this on our Instagram. Make sure you're following us there at David Pakman Show. Don't forget that the best way to support the David Pakman Show is by becoming a member, which gives you access to the daily bonus show, the regular show with no commercials. You also get access to our entire archive of every episode dating back a really long time and plenty of other awesome membership perks. Go to joinpakman.com and use the coupon code BETTER21 for a huge discount. Joinpakman.com. It's great to welcome to the program today Dacher Keltner, who's a professor of psychology at UC Berkeley, the faculty director of the Greater Good Science Center, and also author of the book, The Power Paradox, which we're linking to. It's great to have you on today.
David, it's great to be with you.
So I feel like this conversation is just so relevant in terms of even just thinking about American politics right now and the types of leaders that have done well and not so well over the past many years. Maybe just to start with, My understanding of the sort of Machiavellian view of power is that at a very crude top level, it's better to be feared than loved in terms of maintaining influence and maintaining that power. What are the flaws with that approach generally and maybe in particular today?
Yeah, the Machiavellian approach of power, you nicely summarized, David. Let's remember it emerged in the early 1500s, probably in one of the most violent times in human history. And Machiavelli wrote this book, The Prince, and some people question whether he was really being sincere, but the idea of power there is that you lie, you deceive, you pretend that you're religious when you're not, and you kill your enemies and you destabilize your allies, right? So power is about fear and acquisition, sort of unilateral acquisition. And we've really changed dramatically as a human society in those 500 years, as everybody knows, right? With work's more complicated, politics are more complicated. We've seen the rise of rights of different kinds, and so it's just a different world. And when you look at empirical tests of the Machiavellian perspective, do you believe that you should lie and manipulate and hurt others to rise in power? What you find is those people don't do as well in organizations today. They don't do as well in American politics. The classic Machiavellian was President Nixon, who's now rated as one of the least effective presidents by historians. And we've even done studies showing they don't do as well in finance, in one of the more Machiavellian contexts. So, what I argue in the power paradox is it might be time to abandon that philosophy of power. It's been wildly influential. I think it's at the source of a lot of today's environmental and social ills.
What do you think, or what do you make of the often repeated idea that the more unchecked and or unilateral power one has, the more likely they will be pushed into bad acts or corruption or whatever the case may be? Is it that simple?
I think it's a broad hypothesis that you just articulated with many versions, right? The idea of a democracy is you keep power in check. And when it's not kept in check, as you suggest, David, things get into trouble. The idea of journalism is that you speak truth to power. You hold the powerful accountable. When President Trump tries to destabilize the idea of facts and journalism, we have the trouble we have today, right? Where people question the very notion of a shared democracy. So, yeah, it's fundamental. And what's really interesting, David, when I did the research for the power paradox, this is actually a very old idea in the evolution of our human species.
Right.
Hunter-gatherer societies, hundreds of thousands of years old, very sophisticated analyses show, did this. They kept the powerful in check through social processes, through reputation, through various things that gave rise to our critical oversight of the powerful. And I really worry, as you probably do too, that when we lose those capacities to keep the powerful in check, you get into serious trouble.
Is the sort of Machiavellian approach to power and governance in the modern day essentially equivalent to authoritarianism, in the sense that, when I think of now about being feared, I think about Duterte, I think about Kim Jong-un, I think about Putin, I think about Assad. I sort of think about Trump in that I think he would like to be that, although maybe because of his cartoonish nature, he failed to actually do it in practice. But he liked a lot of those authoritarians as well. Is that analogous?
It is. And it very much, this Machiavellian view of dominate, coerce, lie, manipulate, scare, very much finds a home in authoritarian politics. And in fact, some of the most authoritarian politicians in human history, like Mussolini, were huge fans of Machiavelli, right? And kept the Prince as a leadership guide. And I agree. I think that Trump, wanted to be that, but was kept in check by Wall Street and corporations and the like. And so thank goodness in some sense. So it does, Machiavellianism Machiavellianism is very closely allied with authoritarianism. Even in the American citizenry, we just published a paper showing kind of it's interesting, white men who have been disenfranchised in the United States tend to want that kind of political philosophy to lead. So it's alive.
And do they want it because they feel that it will, as they see it, re-enfranchise them?
Exactly. And I know. And so it's this interesting quality of American politics that we have to grapple with. That's pretty self-evident.
This is maybe getting more into sort of the psychology of power in some sense, but I'm curious what you think of it. There is this, I don't know if it's like a survivorship bias sort of thing, or I don't know exactly what I would call it, but there's definitely this idea, and this happens, I think, in the business world, this happens in the political world and elsewhere, where once you achieve a certain amount of power, success, influence, whatever, over time, you become accustomed to it, and you sort of start to think that like it had to be this way. It's this way because I deserve it, or it's this way because I'm better, or whatever the case may be. And it's very hard to fight that. Even sometimes when I will mentor smaller YouTubers or something like that, because I've been doing this for so long, I'll sort of think like, well, I just did some really basic stuff and it just sort of like happened, and it would have happened regardless. But it really actually, it's the work and it's the day-to-day, et cetera. There's nothing inevitable about a lot of this stuff. No. How does that psychological aspect play into how this evolves?
I think that's such an astute observation. And I think one of the most pernicious dimensions to American politics it is this dynamic you're referring to. We've studied it in the form of essentialism, right? Which is what you find in corporations and you find in organizational structures, is this idea of people who have power start to become blind to the breaks they got, the sources, the opportunities that came their way by where they were born, or just by fate, and they start to develop a sense that it takes special people to lead, right? And it is this sense of like, wow, I have power. There must be. We justify it, and we think, wow, I'm some sort of uniquely gifted person to rise to the top. And why is that perilous? Because number one, it leads to, and we've done work on this, certain kinds of ideas about compensation. Well, maybe I deserve $20 million a year for the work I do, right?
It's like a veil of meritocracy in a sense.
It is, very much so, very much so. And the idea of meritocracy, right? That it's really the special people that, that get into the special schools or deserve certain kinds of compensation or get treated by the law differently, which we have ample evidence of. So I think it's a really dangerous corollary of the psychological dynamics of power, that the powerful think they're above the law and deserve more than other people.
There's these studies that have been popularized over the last few years about how being wealthy, particularly for a long period of time, starts to change the brain in some way. And like what exactly that means, we can talk about it. And it's kind of like the devil is in the details. But does being in a position of power in the way that you study also have a similar effect?
Yeah, and this is work by Sukhvinder Obi in Canada and Naomi Eisenberger at UCLA. I mean, it's astonishing that you can place somebody randomly into a position of power, right? I could take you and randomly assign you to like, hey, you're in charge of other people and you're the powerful one. And one of the big effects at the neurophysiological level is that it tends to deactivate the empathy regions of your brain. So
I've got to do some tough stuff. I might not have done this before, but now that I'm in this position, it's just what I have to do.
Right. But what I worry about with the deactivation of these empathy regions, and we've also found power deactivates the vagus nerve, which is a big bundle of nerves in your chest that helps you connect and be kind to other people. So suddenly when powerful people are acting in a more greedy fashion, they're not sensitive to suffering, they're not aware of other people to the extent that they used to be. We now have a neurophysiological understanding of that power, one person put it dramatically, like it shuts down your empathy regions. That's a little dramatic, but it's on the way towards what's true of power.
So the paradox, or at least what one of the paradoxes that you talk about is individuals or groups or whoever, they get power. Yeah. And the idea is that they're being empowered in order to do things for a group of people. But the more power they get, for a lot of the different reasons you've talked about, starts to limit their ability to really fully think about how they can keep the interests of everyone sort of in mind in their actions, right? I mean, like, this is sort of the paradox that we're talking about.
Yeah, you know, and you just nailed 25 years of my life studying power in different ways, right? You know? But thank you. You know, yeah, you know, what may surprise people is, but once you start thinking deeply about it, there's a lot of truth to this. And we've looked at like who gains power in hunter-gatherer societies, sports teams, nonprofits, government, even finance, et cetera. And it's people like you said, David, who, and Hannah Arendt really put it well, as did Michel Foucault, who you gain power by advancing the greater good, by advancing the interests of the people around you. That is just a basic law, right? And so you do it through promoting strong social networks and sharing knowledge and distributing resources. That leads you to rise in the ranks. And then regrettably, through these psychological processes we've been talking about, once I feel powerful and I'm seduced by myself, you know, I start acting unethically and failing to attend to people's thoughts or recommendations and not feeling for other people. So that's the paradox of power is we rise in some sense to advance other people's interests, but when we feel powerful, we work against it.
Have the stakes sort of changed in the sense that, for example, like in Jared Diamond's work, he's written a lot about how the ability to cooperate and the ability to advance the greater good for your, maybe clan of 150 people, at that point, not being the team player, et cetera, you could be out and you could be dead, right? Like the stakes were very, very life or death. Yeah. Maybe in some senses in 2021 that applies, but it feels as though maybe the stakes have changed to a degree.
Yeah, I think that's the big question, right? Which is, and you put it really, and this is Christopher Bohm, who really wrote about hierarchies and that Jared Diamond's commenting upon, which is that you had to cooperate and be interdependent and work collectively to survive for a couple 100,000 years. And today, in some sense, a lot of the basic processes that enabled that cooperation have been degraded, right? So our ability to hold leaders accountable, in the financial collapse of 2008, I think one person was prosecuted, right? So that just means you can go do whatever you want to do if you're white and privileged and not be held accountable. That's problematic to this model, this cooperative model of power. I worry about certain contexts that teach this Machiavellian, self-interested, above others model of how to lead. You see that in important institutions like, certain business schools and certain economic views of human nature. So yeah, I think you're framing it really. I wish I'd framed that in that fashion in the power paradox, which is we had this workable model of power, right, for hundreds of thousands of years, and now it's been degraded, and we see levels of greed and environmental destruction even that come out of this model of power that may cause our demise.
The book is called The Power Paradox. We've been speaking with the book's author, Dacher Keltner, professor of psychology at UC Berkeley. So great having you on. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks for your thoughtful questions, David.
If you value what we do at The David Pakman Show, remember to support us on Patreon. Go to patreon.com/David Pakman Show, where you can get access to behind-the-scenes videos, the daily bonus show, the commercial-free daily show, as well as special discounts on merch, including hats, hoodies, mugs, and t-shirts. You can support the show for as little as $2 a month. Check it out at patreon.com/David Pakman Show. One of the really worrying trends in the United States right now, really, under this new modern Republican Party, call it whatever you want, Trumpian or whatever the case may be. The thing is that facts truly do not matter anymore. And rewriting history to suit whatever point you're trying to make today, it has become a completely acceptable means to an end. It doesn't matter how you rewrite history. It doesn't matter what lie you tell about the past. As long as it supports whatever point you're trying to make today, it's okay for this modern Republican Party. Here's one new example from the 4th of July weekend. Donald Trump's former press secretary, Kayleigh McEnany, appeared on Fox News, and the context was making the point that conservatives are victims and that Democrats are unpatriotic. And Kayleigh wildly claimed that the founding fathers, the main founding fathers, were all against slavery. This is a lie. It's just a big fat lie. And we're going to look at what she said. And the context was that Democratic Congresswoman Cori Bush said that July 4th is sort of a celebration for white people. Cori Bush said, when they say that the 4th of July is about American freedom, remember, the freedom they're referring to is for white people in the sense that we are celebrating the anniversary of a country which at year one, the date that is being celebrated was one in which black people were enslaved in the United States. That's the context, okay? Let's look at what Kayleigh McEnany had to say about it.
Starting with you, Bill Bennett, the haters never take a day off from hating. That is clear. And they never take a day off of getting the facts wrong. We know most of our forefathers, all of our main founding fathers were against slavery, recognized the evils of it. There's a great piece to that end on Heritage called 1776, not 1619. But I'll leave it to you. You know, they're so wrong on so much. Where to begin?
So that is completely untrue. Okay, that's really, really, really not true. Let's actually go through this because there's an opportunity to actually learn a little something here. The majority of the founding fathers of the United States owned slaves. Now, you could say, well, they owned them, but they were against it. We're going to come back to that. OK, but they were not against it enough not to have their own slaves. Now, I'm talking about Benjamin Franklin, John Hancock, John Jay, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, George Washington, and many others. They owned slaves, some of the names you might not recognize as readily. There were a few founding fathers that did not own slaves. John Adams and Samuel Adams in Massachusetts, for example. Thomas Paine, I don't believe, is known to have owned slaves. Okay. So when Kayleigh McEnany says most of the founding fathers were against slavery, mostly they owned slaves. Now, what is true is that over time, many founding fathers, including some that owned slaves, started to recognize some problems with slavery. Some realized, rightly, that slavery was antithetical to the concept of freedom and liberty on which the U.S. was supposedly based. But some of them seemed more to be thinking about it almost like economically. Thomas Jefferson condemned the injustice of the slave trade in the initial draft of the Declaration of Independence. But there are counterpoints about whether, did that mean he was against slavery or did he just not like the slave trade as it was being carried out internationally? So even that, I mean, I'm sure people will write in and say, no, David, that's super clear. It was either this or it was that. There's some ambiguity to it, but he owned slaves. And then you had some who really wanted to change nothing about whether slavery was federally legal and just say it's a state issue. Now, if, for example, slave owner Benjamin Franklin in Pennsylvania supported anti-slavery causes, but not federally. You know, if South Carolina wants to keep having slaves, well, that's their thing. But in Pennsylvania, we shouldn't have slaves necessarily. So to call that being anti-slavery, again, this is pretty nebulous in many ways. So the point here is, was the opinion on slavery of the founding fathers maybe more complex than they were either for it or against it? Absolutely. Did some founding fathers have seemingly inconsistent positions on slavery? Absolutely. Did some of them change their views on slavery over time? Yes, no doubt about it. But is Kayleigh McEnany right when she says most of the founding fathers were against slavery? No. That's a complete and total lie. And the point here of what Kayleigh McEnany did was simply to try to attack Cori Bush by saying, when Cori Bush says July 4th really celebrates freedom for white people, because at the time, black people were enslaved, Kayleigh wants to say, well, no, the founding fathers were all against slavery. And that is simply inaccurate. And so her entire defense falls apart. Now, whether you agree that July 4th is a pro-slavery holiday or a celebration of an era when there was slavery, that's a debate. That's a debate you can have, and you can say, well, okay, yes, we're celebrating the anniversary of a date at which there was slavery. We no longer have that. We can still recognize that this is a milestone in the existence of the country without being in agreement with all the things that the country did at the time, right? Then you're in the weeds, you're in the details. But Kayleigh McEnany is just wrong. And this is the exact type of little pithy talking point that the average Fox News viewer will never investigate and will simply start to repeat and repeat and repeat. It's sad more than anything else. I don't know what's going on, guys, with Fox News, but Sean Hannity will not stop talking about Trump's dementia test. They just will not stop talking about it and celebrating it like some kind of major achievement. Here is a new clip from yesterday. This was from yesterday's Sean Hannity program. And again, Hannity talking about Trump's dementia screening test. Is there nothing else to talk about for this guy?
And talk about the cognitive side of things. Donald Trump took that cognitive test. You told me that he passed it with a perfect score, 30 of 30.
Sir, doctors have never seen such a perfect score. It's unbelievable, sir.
Sir.
Yeah. Just Hannity's really impressed.
You told me it's a hard exam. You told me that you want Joe Biden to take one. What has been the response?
None. I haven't heard a single thing, Sean. And you're right. This is not a laughing matter anymore.
Why does the Biden administration have to respond to Trump's former doctor, the same guy who said Trump is 6'3" and weighs 239, by the way? Why does the Biden administration have to respond to that? I simply don't get it. And this is just, everybody's obsessed with this now. And of course, the idea is it's a distraction narrative to try to get the attention on something other than the complete absurdity of what the Republican Party has become. Here's just a reminder. Here's Trump ranting about his cognitive test at the U.S.-Mexico border last week.
But he did a test. Did I ace it? Yes, sir. I aced it. And I'd like to see Biden ace it. He won't ace it. He'll get the first two. There's 35 questions, and the first 2 or 3 are pretty easy. They're the animals. Is this a lion, a giraffe? When he gets to around 20, he's going to have a little hard time. I think he's going to have a hard time with the first few, actually.
Yeah. So as I told you yesterday, there are not 35 questions. There's 30 points. It's like 19 to 23 questions, depending on how you count them. And again, Trump obsessed with the idea that this is a hard test. This is just a way to screen relatively serious cognitive decline or dementia. And then again, with Hannity, I mean, what's pathetic is it's become a way to suck up to Trump. They suck up to Trump by saying you're not demented, essentially, is what's happening.
In trouble with these comments.
We aced it. I think I can say that I aced it.
Did he get one? He didn't get one question wrong, did he? 30 out of 30. Yeah. Wow.
And they did get
The crowd cheering, guys. The crowd cheering for it.
a little more difficult after you got by 15, I would say. But
I heard the first 3 questions are, is it a giraffe or an elephant, right?
Well, you know, that's what the fake news does. They take the first 2 or 3 questions and they put them in.
It's a really tough I mean, I looked at it, guys. It's tougher than what, in high school I did AP economics, and that was an easy one. The Trump dementia test was really, really tough. So how long will this obsession go on? I really have no idea, but it's very, very strange. I got a really interesting voicemail that I want to play for you. Of course, you can call the voicemail number any time of day. The number is 219-2-DAVID-P. Here is a voicemail about why do people who are anti-Semitic claim to love Israel? It doesn't make sense.
Hey, David, I was just wondering if you had any insights into why these people that hate Jews so much are so pro-Israel. I don't get it. Thank you.
There's a couple different things going on. Number one, a lot of the evangelical support for Israel is not rooted in any desire to provide a safe haven for Jews that have been persecuted in, dozens and dozens of countries for 1,000 years or longer. It's not rooted in that. For many evangelicals, it's rooted in, we believe the second coming of Jesus will happen when there is a strong Israel. And then there's a bunch of different versions of it. When a temple is rebuilt or whatever. Okay, but basically they believe that the second coming of Jesus will happen if they support Israel. Others believe the rapture will happen if they support Israel. For some, it's one and the same. There's all these different sects and they tend to have different beliefs. So that's part of it. And then for many others on the right, it's either just they sort of like militarism and they like the idea of there's other countries that have some of the cool advanced weapons that we have, and or they see it as a way to sort of fight proxy wars against populations they don't like in the Middle East. But it's not. I understand that it sounds like, wait, a lot of these people are anti-Semitic. They often play into anti-Semitic tropes, repeat them, etc., but they claim to support Israel. They are two completely different things, and much the same as what is going on with American anti-Semitism is a separate issue from Israeli foreign policy. The anti-Semites who claim to like Israel are sort of operating in two different spaces. And it might sound like it's one incoherent space, and to some degree it is. But for many of them, these are completely different issues. There's the political state of Israel, and then there's Jews about whom they have prejudiced beliefs in the United States and sort of the day-to-day community. It's a very good question because it does seem incoherent and inconsistent. And in a sense, it absolutely is. We have a great bonus show for you today. I'm out of time, but trust me, it's a good one. Sign up at joinpakman.com and you'll get instant access. Thanks a lot for watching today's show. I just want to take a second to tell you about today's sponsors. Ground News is combating divisiveness in media. Ground is a news comparison platform that helps you see multiple perspectives for any news story so you can be more of a well-rounded news reader. Download the free app at ground.news/Pakman.